What happens when beauty isn't soft, sweet, or approachable, but sharp, intimidating, and just a little bit cruel? Scroll through TikTok right now and you'll see it everywhere. Perfectly lip gloss girls rolling their eyes, hair flips slowed down to cinematic edits, captions that read like taunts, not compliments. Gen Z isn't obsessing over the relatable best friend or the quirky girl next door anymore. They're idolizing the cold, the untouchable, the pretty mean girl. It's a surprising turn, isn't it? For years, internet culture pushed us towards relatability. Think of the "I'm just like you" influencers, the cozy girl next door aesthetics, the endless emphasis on being authentic and approachable. But suddenly, that softness feels outdated. Now the cultural mood has shifted, and the women being celebrated aren't nice at all. They're blunt, they're exclusive, they're beautiful, and they don't care if you know it. On the surface, this might look like just another aesthetic trend, another TikTok era for girls to dress up in, but beneath the lip liner and designer sunglasses is something far more telling. The pretty mean girl isn't just a vibe, she's a fantasy of power. She represents what it looks like when femininity refuses to be gentle, self-sacrificing, or endlessly accommodating. And in a world that constantly demands women to be likable, available, and easy to consume, that refusal feels radical. But here's the twist, she's not new. From the femme fatales of old Hollywood to the queen bees of Y2K teen movies, the pretty mean girl has always haunted our cultural imagination. Sometimes she's feared, sometimes she's ridiculed, and sometimes, like now, she's worshipped. So in this video essay, we're going to trace her rise from the glamorous cruelty of the 1940s screen sirens to the designer-clad dominance of Blair Waldorf, all the way to today's TikTok edits that glorify the resting bitch face. And along the way, we'll ask, why do we love her? Why do we fear her? And what does her return say about how Gen Z is reimagining femininity, power, and survival in a culture that seems to admire women most when they're not very nice at all? Because maybe the question isn't why the mean girl's back, but why she really never left. And hello everyone, my name is Laura and welcome to my channel. Chapter 1, the mean girl as the archetype. If you spent any time on TikTok lately, you've probably noticed her. She's the girl in the slick back bun, oversized sunglasses, and matte lip liner scrolling on her phone like the world around her doesn't exist. She's the star of Delulu edits set to Lana Del Rey songs, or the one posting blunt, borderline cruel jokes under the guise of just being honest. She's not relatable, not approachable, and definitely not warm. She's icy, she's intimidating, and she's captivating. This is today's TikTok mean girl, the digital evolution of a character who has been with us for decades. Her look is instantly recognizable: glossy hair, arched brows, designer-coded outfits, and that expression the internet has nicknamed a resting bitch face. She doesn't beg for attention, she expects it. Her humor is dry, her tone is cutting, and her power comes from what she withholds rather than what she gives. In an online world obsessed with oversharing, she withholds everything: her smile, her approval, her accessibility, and that scarcity is precisely what makes her magnetic. But the pretty mean girl didn't just start on TikTok. She's the latest reincarnation of a much older archetype. In the 1940s, Hollywood gave us the femme fatale, the seductive woman whose beauty was a trap, whose glamour concealed danger. Think Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity, a woman both irresistible and terrifying, who used her allure as a weapon. Decades later, in the teen comedies of the late 20th century and early 21st century, the mean girl was reborn as the high school queen bee. Regina George in Mean Girls and Blair Waldorf in Gossip Girl didn't just rule their worlds, they defined what power looked like for a generation of girls. Their cruelty was legendary, their wardrobes iconic, and their ability to dominate a room without lifting a finger unmatched. The fascinating thing about these characters is how much they reveal about us. On one hand, we're conditioned to despise them. When we cheer when Regina gets hit by a bus, or when Blair's schemes inevitably backfire. The narrative punishes them, reminding us that cruelty and being combined are dangerous, even destructive. And yet, we can't look away. For many viewers, there's a secret thrill in imagining what it would feel like to command that level of control, to walk into a room and have every eye turn, not just because you're friendly or relatable, but because you're feared, admired, and maybe even a little hated. That tension, our simultaneous hatred of the mean girl and our desire to be her, is exactly what makes her such a powerful archetype. She embodies a version of femininity that is still unapologetically self-serving, exclusive, and commanding in a world that usually demands women be nurturing, agreeable, and selfless. In her meanness, she offers a fantasy of freedom, and maybe that's why she keeps coming back. Because she gives us permission, if only for a moment, to imagine what it feels like to stop being nice. Chapter 2. Pretty and Dangerous, Hollywood's Legacy. The pretty mean girl didn't originate on TikTok, or even in the high schools of Mean Girls and Gossip Girl. Her roots stretch much further back, to the silver screens of the 1940s Hollywood, where she first appeared under another name, the femme fatale. These women weren't teenagers with lip gloss and burn books. They were glamorous, mature, and deadly. The femme fatale was beauty weaponized, a woman who could lure men to their downfall with a glance, a cigarette, or a whisper. Think Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity, or Lana Turner in The Postman Always Rings Twice. These women weren't nurturing, they were selfless, and they weren't interested in motherhood or domestic bliss. They embodied a terrifying possibility. What happens when a woman's power comes not from sacrifice, but from desire, control, and cruelty? What made the femme fatale so threatening wasn't just her sexuality, it was her autonomy. She didn't wait for men to define her story. Instead, she used beauty like armor and cruelty like a blade. In post-war America that was desperate to push women back into the domestic roles after years of independence during World War II, the femme fatale was a cinematic warning. She embodied male anxieties about women who refused to return to the kitchens, who had tasted freedom and weren't willing to give it up. She was always punished on screen, always undone by her ambition or her ruthlessness, but the cultural fascination with her never faded. By the 1950s, the femme fatale evolved into something softer, or at least packaged differently. Hollywood presented two opposing feminine ideals: Marilyn Monroe, the innocent, breathy model who radiated vulnerability, and Elizabeth Taylor, the dark-haired beauty whose roles often leaned into icy elegance and controlled dominance. Monroe was the dream girl you wanted to protect. Taylor was the woman you wanted but could never control. These dueling images of femininity, soft and pliant, versus sharp and commanding, created a cultural split that still echoes today. The pretty mean girl archetype clearly descends from the Taylor lineage: glamorous, self-assured, and untouchable. She wasn't the girl next door. She was the woman on top of the staircase looking down. Fast forward a few decades, and the mean girl left smoky noir bars for high school hallways. In the 80s and the 1990s, teen movies resurrected the archetype, now dressed in plaid skirts, chokers, and designer handbags. In Heathers from 1988, Heather Chandler ruled her school with an iron fist disguised as a scrunchie, a teenage dictator who made cruelty look stylish. In Clueless from 1995, Cher blurred the line between queen bee and benevolent ruler, her charm occasionally masking her cruelty. And then there's Jawbreaker from 1999, which pushed the archetype into a darker satire, showing how lethal beauty and popularity could become. And then of course there's Mean Girls, the definitive reinvention of the pretty mean girl for the millennial generation. Regina George wasn't just a character, she was a cultural event. She crystallized everything the archetype represented: beauty, dominance, exclusivity, and the thrill of watching it all collapse. What unites all these portrayals, from the femme fatale to the teen queen bee, is what they reveal about cultural anxieties. These women are glamorous but dangerous, magnetic but hated. They embody society's discomfort with women who wield power outside of acceptable roles like motherhood, romance, or softness. They show us how threatening beauty becomes when it's not accompanied by gentleness, and how terrifying women seem when they're not trying to be likable. That's why the mean girl must always be punished on screen, destroyed, humbled, or redeemed. She can exist as fantasy, but never as a sustainable reality. And yet, even as narratives punish her, audiences can't stop loving her. The femme fatale was blamed for men's downfall, but moviegoers were enthralled by her. Regina George was hit by a bus, but she remained the most quotable character in the film. This contradiction is the heartbeat of the archetype. She is feared, but she also is desired. She is mocked, but secretly admired. She represents a freedom most women aren't allowed to claim, which is why, even when the story condemns her, the audience keeps her alive in memory and reinvents her again and again. Chapter 3: TikTok, Hypervisibility, and the Return of Cruel Femininity. On TikTok, being nice doesn't always go viral. What does? Bluntness, shade, the perfectly timed eye roll, or the unapologetic smirk of a girl who clearly doesn't care whether you like her or not. The platform rewards quick, sharp displays of personality, the kind of moments that can be clipped, looped, and shared as a cultural shorthand. And the pretty mean girl archetype fits this environment perfectly. She's bite-sized, iconic, instantly recognizable. Her power comes not from the depth or relatability, but from the effortless delivery of a single cutting glance. This is where the hot girl humor comes in. It's a new kind of comedy that thrives on aloofness and detachment. Instead of the self-deprecating, quirky humor that dominated early internet culture, hot girl humor is blunt, self-centered, and deliberately unbothered. A TikTok creator might film herself saying, "I don't chase men, I replace them," while applying lip gloss in a bathroom mirror. Another might caption a slow-motion hair flip with, "Sorry, I don't argue, I get bored." These moments aren't about relatability. They're about aspirational cruelty. They're funny because they're mean, and they're compelling because they feel like a refusal to play by the old rules of femininity. The editing culture of TikTok amplifies this aesthetic. Montages of girls ignoring text, flipping their hair, or brushing past men on the street are set to moody soundtracks, often Lana Del Rey, FKA Twigs, or icy trap beats. A 10-second clip becomes a mood board for cruelty, a fantasy of feminine dominance condensed into a perfectly shareable form. In many ways, these edits function like modern-day mythology. They take ordinary gestures, a gloss application, a sideways glance, and turn them into symbols of power. The pretty mean girl becomes not just a character, but a vibe that viewers can inhabit, even if just for a moment. What makes this fascinating is how sharply it contrasts with the influencer culture of the 2010s. Back then, the internet demanded relatability. Influencers sold us morning routines, get ready with me videos, and casual authenticity. The illusion that they were just like us, only a little more polished. The mean girl trend is a rebellion against that. She's not relatable, she's aspirational. She doesn't open up her life for you to consume. In fact, her allure comes from the opposite, from her refusal to be accessible, her deliberate withholding of information, intimacy, and warmth. And the refusal is precisely what makes her algorithmically successful. In a space saturated with oversharing, the pretty mean girl thrives by offering scarcity. She doesn't flood the feed with confessions or daily updates. She offers brief flashes of beauty, detachment, and cruelty. She knows you'll replay the clip, share it, remix it, because you want more, and because she refuses to give you more. She becomes irresistible. The mean girl is a perfect TikTok product, endlessly consumable, but never available. But here's the deeper layer. This isn't just a quick algorithmic culture. It's a reflection of a generational shift. Gen Z grew up watching the exhausting effects of constant relatability, the burnout of YouTubers, the curated authenticity of Instagram moms, the impossibility of always being nice and available online. The rise of the pretty mean girl on TikTok feels like a rejection of that pressure. It's the fantasy of opting out, of being untouchable in a culture that demands you constantly explain, share, and smile. So while the mean girl on TikTok looks new, she's really an old fantasy reborn for the algorithm. She's Regina George with an iPhone, a femme fatale in 9-second edits. She's a rebellion against the pressure to be likable, reframed as entertainment for an audience that is both fascinated and unsettled by women who dare to be cruel. Chapter 4: Class, Coolness, and the Politics of Being Mean. One of the most striking elements of the pretty mean girl archetype is how often it's tied to wealth. Meanness in this context isn't random cruelty, it's aspirational. To be aloof, dismissive, or cruel is a signal that you're above the concerns of ordinary people. Your indifference suggests you don't need to be liked because you already have the luxury, the beauty, and the power that others are scrambling to attain. In other words, being mean is a form of branding. It communicates scarcity, status, and exclusivity in the same way a designer handbag or a reserved VIP table does. The link between wealth and cruelty has long been embodied in pop culture. In the 1980s, Dynasty and Dallas gave us women like Alexis Carrington, dripping in diamonds, unapologetically vicious, and absolutely captivating. Her cruelty wasn't just tolerated, it was glamorous, a mark of sophistication and untouchable status. In more recent years, there's Disney's Cruella, reimagined one of cinema's most notorious villains as a misunderstood fashion icon, turning her cruelty into kind of couture performance. And today we see this again in TikTok's driven resurgence of the mob wife aesthetic. Fur coats, heavy eyeliner, teased hair, and the attitude of a woman who doesn't care if she intimidates you. Cruelty here isn't weakness, it's chic, is power trapped in luxury. But beneath the glamour, the mean girl has always served a social function. She's a gatekeeper. In high school settings, she decides who's in and who's out. In Hollywood's depictions, she embodies class anxiety, drawing sharp lines between the privileged and the outsiders. In influencer culture, she creates hierarchies of taste, dictating what looks aspirational and what looks cheap, what's in the season and what's already embarrassing. Her cruelty isn't just personal, it's systemic. It upholds the social order by ensuring that not everyone can belong. This is where the politics of being mean gets complicated. On the one hand, cruelty feels empowering because it frees women from the endless obligation to be nice, accommodating, and available. It flips the script. Instead of being consumed, the mean girl consumes others, judging, excluding, and dismissing. But on the other hand, her power often rests on exclusion that mirrors the same hierarchies society already enforces: beauty, privilege, wealth, thinness, and access to luxury. Her meanness might look radical, but in many cases it reinforces old systems of power by simply repackaging them as cool. So we have to ask, is cruelty really liberation, or just another form of exclusivity? When a TikTok mean girl smirks in her Prada sunglasses while telling you she doesn't care about your opinion, is she breaking free from patriarchal expectations? Or is she just performing a role that depends on other people being left out? Is she rewriting the rules of femininity? Or is she just playing the same game of hierarchy and scarcity in a more glamorous outfit? That tension is what keeps the archetype alive, because on some level we admire her. We want the freedom that comes with not caring, with not explaining, with not being liked. But at the same time, we know her power comes at a cost. It's not available to everyone. Cruelty might feel like control, but more often than not, it's control that is bought, styled, and carefully curated. In that way, the pretty mean girl becomes both a fantasy of liberation and a reminder of the very systems that keep most women trapped. Chapter 5, Why Gen Z Finds Her Empowering. For decades, women were taught that being nice was not just expected but required. Politeness, emotional caretaking, and a constant availability to others were woven into the definition of femininity itself. A good girl was the one who smiled even when uncomfortable, who smoothed over conflict, who anticipated everyone else's needs before her own. This expectation has been passed down in everything from etiquette books to Disney princesses, and it still lingers in the unspoken rules of workplaces, friendships, and even online spaces. But Gen Z is tired of it. They've grown up watching the consequences of women stretching themselves thin in order to please, and they're rejecting it outright. For them, the mean girl feels less like a villain and more like a rebellion against culture that romanticizes female self-sacrifice. Part of this rejection stems from the broader cultural backdrop Gen Z has inherited. This is a generation raised on instability, economic precarity, pandemics, political unrest, and the relentless pressures of social media. They live in a world that feels perpetually uncertain and even hostile, where burnout is the baseline and optimism feels naive. In this climate, cruelty isn't just a personality trait, it's a form of armor. To be detached, dismissive, or even a little cruel is to project control in a world where so much feels uncontrollable. It's a survival strategy disguised as an aesthetic. This is why detachment is so appealing. Not caring about men's approval, about social norms, about being liked becomes a radical stance when the dominant culture is built on extracting emotional labor from women. The mean girl archetype offers a fantasy of stepping outside that cycle. She doesn't manage anyone's feelings. She doesn't apologize for her ambition. She doesn't cushion her words to make others comfortable. In an era when emotional burnout is an epidemic, her refusal feels intoxicating. It whispers to viewers, what if you just stop caring too? But the question remains, does this archetype actually empower women, or is it just another performance of power that still serves the same systems? On the one hand, the mean girl can feel like a feminist reclamation, a way of seizing control over the narratives that once punished women for being cold, ambitious, or unlikable. By embracing cruelty, women reclaim the right to stop smiling, to stop apologizing, and stop making themselves endlessly consumable. Yet, on the other hand, the aesthetic often reinforces the very hierarchies it claims to reject. After all, not everyone has the privilege to be aloof or cruel and still be admired. Often the fantasy of meanness is accessible only to those who already embody other forms of privilege. Beauty, thinness, and wealth. This is the paradox at the heart of the archetype. For Gen Z, the pretty mean girl represents freedom from the exhausting expectations of niceness. She symbolizes control, detachment, and self-preservation in a world that constantly demands more. But her power isn't equally distributed. While she offers a seductive fantasy of liberation, she also risks cycling old patterns of exclusion, just dressed up in Prada sunglasses and TikTok edits. So the question becomes, is the mean girl truly a new face of feminist power? Or is she just another reminder that in order to be admired for cruelty, you first have to be beautiful, privileged, and already above the rules? The answer may not be clear, but the fascination is undeniable. And for Gen Z, even if she isn't fully liberating, she still represents something worth longing for, the dream of finally being untouchable. The pretty mean girl has always been more than just a character. She's a mirror reflecting our deepest cultural anxieties and desires about women, beauty, and power. From the smoky femme fatales of the 1940s Hollywood, to the high school queen bees of the 2000s, to today's TikTok edits of aloof influencers, she keeps returning, slightly rebranded, slightly updated, but always recognizable. And the fact that she endures tells us something important. She fulfills a fantasy we can't quite let go of. Her cruelty, her detachment, her refusal to be likable, they all strike at the heart of femininity as it's traditionally been defined. For centuries, women have been told to soften their edges, to be accommodating, to smooth over discomfort. The mean girl rejects all of that. She refuses to apologize, to explain, or to make herself palatable. And in doing so, she represents something both dangerous and desirable. Dangerous to the systems that rely on women's emotional labor, and desirable to anyone who has ever felt trapped by the exhausting demand to always be nice. But the pretty mean girl is also a paradox. Her power is magnetic, but it's often built on exclusivity. Her cruelty feels liberating, but it can also reinforce hierarchies of beauty, wealth, and privilege. She can be a feminist reclamation, but also a recycled performance of power that leaves most women still on the outside. That tension, the fact that she is both empowering and exclusionary, both liberating and limiting, is why she fascinates us. She embodies both the dream of freedom and the reminder of its cost. So what do we make of her return today? For Gen Z, in a world of burnout, precarity, and endless social performance, the pretty mean girl offers a fantasy of control. She represents the possibility of stepping back, of becoming untouchable, of refusing to be consumed. And even if she isn't entirely new, even if her cruelty sometimes hides the same old hierarchies, she still feels radical in a culture that insists women be endlessly accommodating. Maybe that's why we keep bringing her back. Not because we believe in her perfection, but because we need her rebellion. Because she shows us what it might feel like to stop explaining, stop apologizing, and stop caring. But here's a final question I'll leave with you. Do we love the mean girl because she's truly powerful, or because she gives us a fantasy of power we still can't access in real life? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to know where you stand on this topic And maybe, just maybe, the most radical thing a woman can be today is someone who doesn't care if she's nice at all. I mean, I feel like there will always be the mean girls. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with being confident and like standing up for yourself and not letting people walk all over you versus like actually being a bully and mean, like in the movie like Mean Girls and the other movies. So it's like a slippery slope. Like I'm pro being confident but not like being a bee and like actually being mean to people. And like I feel like I'm always on the nicer side, almost to a fault. I feel like as I'm getting older, I'm getting a bit more rough around the edges and like trying to stand up for myself more, because I feel like I can be a pushover in some ways. So, but it's an interesting thing. And I did notice this trend on TikTok, so I thought it was interesting. Anyways, let me know in the comments below your thoughts on this. All right, thanks for watching.